Thanks for joining me for another episode of the Your Longevity Blueprint podcast. Today I have on as a guest Jodi Cohen. Jodi Sternoff Cohen is a best-selling author, award-winning journalist, functional practitioner, and founder of Vibrant Blue Oils, where she has combined her training in nutritional therapy and aromatherapy to create a unique proprietary blend of organic and wild-crafted essential oils. She's helped over 50,000 clients heal from brain-related challenges, including anxiety, insomnia, and autoimmunity. For the past 10 years, she has lectured at wellness centers, conferences, and corporations on brain health, essential oils, stress, and detoxification. She has been seen in the New York Times, Wellness Mama, Elephant Journal, and numerous publications. Her website, vibrantblueoils.com, is visited by over 300,000 natural health seekers every year, and she has rapidly become a top resource for essential oil education on the internet today. Jodi'd like to talk about her book, Essential. Oh, shoot. That was just extra in there. I didn't prep for that. We'll just cut that out. Okay. So welcome to the show, Jodi.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, tell me your story. How did you become so passionate about essential oils, and how did you become a leading expert in this field and start your company?
I think necessity is the mother of invention. So my journey into nutrition, I'd always been fairly healthy and kind of an intuitive eater, but I really realized the power of food. Had a really easy first kid, had a second one 22 months later, not so easy. Was taking every parenting class I could find, nothing helped. One day at a birthday party, a friend was complimenting me on how well behaved he was. And then another mom passed out a snack, happened to be Ritz crackers. He Jekyll-Hyded and took off sprinting. Once I roped him back in and came back, my friend said, I've never seen him switch that quickly after eating something. My brother was on Ritalin his whole life, and it turned out he was just allergic to weird foods. You should look into nutrition. And I
Yeah.
thought, I can do that. I've done everything else. Why not? And our big cue with him used to be like, look at my nose. And he was all over the place. Took him to this nutritionist. He basically said, take him off soy, corn, and dairy. We did. And the next day, literally, look at my nose. What, mommy? It was so stark and dramatic that I thought, this is crazy. I've been banging my head against the wall for almost 3 years, and it's nutrition. I need to learn more. So I
Yeah.
went back and got a degree in nutritional therapy and was trying to help other moms, who had really squirmy kids. And as a practitioner, it's hard to kind of pinpoint them and assess when they're all over the place. And so I learned this technique called muscle testing that I use to really zero in on what's the core issue and what's going to help the most, because you can't give kids like 17 things. You really need to pick
Sure.
2 things. So that came in handy when my second rock bottom hit. My husband, I just thought he was really fun. After my first child, we realized he was manic. After my second child, he became depressed. And I was really worried that he was going to die on my watch. And so it was, a lifetime of walking on eggshells while trying to raise kids and, work and volunteer. And at a certain point, it became pretty obvious that his needs, my skill set needed support. So we moved him to a residential treatment facility. And the minute I knew he was safe and it wasn't my job to keep him safe, it was like my adrenals, had been going at hyperspeed, and I was deficit spending on my energy reserves, and I just collapsed. I could barely get out of bed. The kids were 5 and 7. I would wake up, feed them breakfast, pack their lunch, drive them to school, come home, crawl back into bed, and set the alarm for 10 minutes before pickup. And I kept trying. I knew enough about what was supposed to help my adrenals. I was ingesting all the right things. Nothing was helping. And at a certain point, before this happened, I had helped a friend with a big event, and she was interested in essential oils. So she was planning to gift me this big box, and she came over to drop them off and said, I wonder, you've been so high stress, high cortisol for so long, and we know that, causes systemic inflammation. I bet your gut is so inflamed that nothing you're ingesting is really supporting you. Let's try something topical, try the oils. And I thought, well, you know what? I'll try anything. Like,
What do you have
I
to
can't.
lose? Yeah.
Yeah, there's no downside. So because I knew muscle testing, I kind of muscle tested the box for the adrenals. I found 5 remedies, which surprised me because normally I got 1. And then I had a thought, oh, they're liquid. I can combine them. So I tested, each individual oil made my first blend, put it on my low back over my adrenals, and literally felt like myself for the first time in weeks.
So now I want to ask, what were those? Can you spill
Actually,
the
it's
beans?
it's yeah, and it's interesting in the book. I not only
Yeah.
share the ingredients, but share the ratio. So it's stimulatory, not totally surprising. It's thyme, gabapentin, manuka, cinnamon, and oh my goodness, I'm having I'll look in the book. You know what?
That's all
I'll,
right.
I'll make sure we share it in the show notes. But it's our adrenal blend,
So and the
and
book you're referring to is your new book, Essential Oils to Boost the Brain and Heal the Body.
yes, yes, yeah. So basically, I kind of kept making up. I made this blend. I went running, which is normally when I feel grumpy or whatever, I would go run and I'd always feel better. And when walking up a flight of stairs feels like overwhelming and exhausting, the idea of running 3 miles was not even in my consideration set. So I went running, I came home, I took a shower, I cleaned the house, I did the laundry, I put the laundry away, I went to the supermarket, I
Wow.
made the favorite meal. I was like, wow, that worked well. Like that, reverse engineering, that was a good choice, and that night, energy dips often corresponds to insomnia. So I would get them in bed and then literally watch the clock tick, 10, 10, 10, 10, 20. And at a certain point, I thought, gosh, I wonder, I know this is the pineal gland that releases melatonin. I wonder if I can do something to, support sleep. So went downstairs, made something up, the skin, one thing about oils that I'll talk about is that they get into the cells really quickly because they're small and fat soluble. They can cross the blood-brain barrier, but certain areas of the skin, like where it's popular to apply perfume or oils, like the wrists or behind the ears or above the ears, the skin is thinner. So it's easier to get into the body quickly. So anyway, I applied the blend, fell right asleep, probably slept better than I'd slept in years, and thought, okay, another win. And I just kept making things up as I went. And at a certain point, my friends were like, oh, we want to try it, and it seemed to work for everyone. And when I had more of my mental and physical energy back, a friend was like, you have to do something with this. This is so good. And I thought, well, gosh, someone must be doing this. It feels so obvious. So I finally went online and did the research and was super surprised by two things. The first was no one was really looking at oil blends kind of through the lens of physiology the way I
Mm.
was. And the second thing that surprised me was how complicated they made it. And I was almost grateful that I didn't have the mental capacity to start with research because I would have felt completely unqualified and never tried it. And so, we went to, there was a nutritional therapy conference. And at the time, I think it was $200 to be a vendor. So my friends were like, let's just go. Like, let's see, it makes sense to us. Let's see if other people like it. And we sold out the first day. It was a 3-day event. And I thought, okay, everyone said, like, I've wanted to try oils. They felt a little confusing and overwhelming. I felt unqualified, but I like the way you've organized it. Like, the way you've put it together makes sense to me. And I can see how this would kind of fit into what I'm already offering. So that's really how I started.
How your company began.
Yeah.
So I want to get into back to kind of the physiology that you mentioned. I know a lot of the listeners have also heard, oh, essential oils can help. How do they help? Like, I know they've been around since biblical times, right? I mean, that's what the wise men brought Jesus, right? Frankincense and myrrh. I mean, they've been around a long time. So I do think they've stood the test of time, but I want to kind of understand how and why. So can you get a little bit into like how the essential oils work? Because I know some listeners may think that oils are kind of hocus pocus or it's all in your head or whatnot. So can you explain to us how they work?
Yeah. You know what most people forget? So oils are really the concentrated essences of plants,
Okay.
herbs, tree bark, fruits, flowers. And most people forget that most of the modern pharmaceutical drugs are the derivative of plants. In fact,
Right.
over 50% of pharmaceutical drugs are derived from plants.
Right.
Aspirin is white willow bark, Valium is valerian root, but they have to change them. You can't
Patent
patent a
something.
natural.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes, like vitamin D would be patented if it could be. So they just modify it enough. And, people stand to make a ton of money from pharmaceutical drugs. So if everyone remembered that they could just use plants, certain people would be less wealthy. And, what's interesting about oils is they're the concentrated essence. Like, as you know, when we're trying to help people return to balance, like if they're super low in vitamin D, you're going to megadose your highly concentrated vitamin D to get them back into balance. So sometimes you need something that's super concentrated to tip the scale. What's fascinating, in the world that we live in now is that so many people have gut inflammation. And,
Mhm.
in order to assimilate your nutrients, your digestion needs to be turned on. You need to kind of be absorbing your nutrients. You need to not be having um, immune reactions to certain foods. And so most of the food that we consume, the supplements, the remedies, it all goes through the digestive tract. And if that's working perfectly, you're good. But if there's any kind of gut inflammation or compromise, you might want to look for an alternate path. It's kind of like if the main road is under construction, you take a detour, right? So what are the other channels to get remedies into your system? Well, your skin, that's why we use hormonal creams and nicotine patches. Anything you put on your skin gets into your bloodstream within 20 minutes. Certain places on the skin, especially if molecules are really small, it can get in faster. And then the fastest way into our brain, one of the challenges with modern medicine is the brain is really protected by the blood-brain barrier. It's a pretty fierce bodyguard. It
Mhm.
only lets in super small fat soluble molecules like essential oils and some other remedies. Like, this is one reason they can't do chemotherapy in the brain, because the molecules can't get through. And what people forget is nose cells are actually brain cells. The fastest, most immediate route into your brain is your sense of smell, because it keeps you safe. It recognizes predator odor, it recognizes danger signals like fire. It also helps you recognize food and water to keep you alive. So, of the five senses, your sense of smell goes directly to your amygdala. All the other four senses are routed to the thalamus first. So when you smell things,
Hmm.
that kind of triggers a whole hormonal, message system cascade. Like there's a Nobel laureate researcher who did all this research on the olfactory receptors, specifically on predator odor receptors. And then she took it one step further to see what would turn off that signal, and it was the smell of rose. So the whole idea of stopping to smell the roses, it
Hmm.
not only smells good, but it actually kind of turns off the danger fear signals in your body. It calms you down really quickly.
Very interesting. So when you mentioned that oils essentially come from all various components of plants, that makes me want to ask the question, kind of if we go the quality direction, like what makes an essential oil quality? Obviously you want it to work, but you want it to not be contaminated. Like I think of I
Yes.
don't eat certain grains, right? Because of the mold toxins, the herbicides, and the pesticides used on them. So that would apply to the plants that the oils come from as well, correct?
That is you're preaching to the choir. That is what I stand on my soapbox and preach. Yeah. Organic is really the only thing that matters. And some plants are
Okay.
kind of grown in the wild. They're wild crafted, and they're not going to use pesticides anyway. Some things like mint kind of grows like a weed. Basil, they're easy to grow. They don't need pesticides. But yeah, organic is the most important quality to look for.
So that's a big take home for the listener, right? So how else would the consumer be able to differentiate quality? I know that's a big conversation piece with my patients as far as supplements are concerned. We want them to have, highly efficacious products that are going to work. And obviously we're biased to our brands, but there are a lot of high quality companies out there that work and that are, I feel, very safe, that aren't laced with any nasty ingredients from other countries, whatnot. So how does someone know, other than that oil, would the bottle say organic, or how else can they differentiate brands? Like, how can they know what they're getting as quality and safe at the same time?
You know, I think there's a lot of fear mongering in this space, mostly for profit. I think that certain companies really like to do really nasty things and call really nasty names. But at the end of the day, go organic if you can. These name calling companies are not organic, which is why they make up other names. And
Mm,
it's a little bit like if you walk around the mall, Cinnabon, there's something totally gross and unnatural about that smell. Those bath stores, you can smell the weird candles. Like, trust yourself, trust your intuition. If something smells artificial, avoid it. And for the you know I think you can get like orange is my favorite starter oil for people because the citrus blends are amazing for calming anxiety and depression. There's a lot of research that backs that up that I talk about in the book. And certain citrus blends like bergamot and neroli are quite expensive and they're often heralded for being the best. And the reality is orange is just as good, especially for kids. Kids love orange. You can find a bottle of orange oil probably even in your supermarket, for under $10, but just smell it and make sure it doesn't smell synthetic and
Sure.
artificial. And then don't worry too much. It's kind of like I helped a truck driver with nutrition, and I'm like, you know what? Buy an apple. Who cares if it's organic? It's better than Doritos. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
just start where you can.
Yep. Good point. I want to get into kids and how we can use oils for children. But before we get there, let's maybe go back to, and I'm sure you talk about this in your book, what challenges essential oils are best suited to support? So you kind of already mentioned brain health because the delivery method, right? We can essentially get them up to our brain cells. But what other challenges are essential oils best suited?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And that's one of the other things that I find frustrating is, I don't think oils are for everything. If you're having a heart attack, go to the ER. If you broke your arm, wear a cast.
Yeah.
I think that oils are amazing for prevention and really for helping to kind of shift the nervous system into that safety place where
Sure.
you can, where all other, our nervous system is really the operating system of our body. It's called the autonomic nervous system. It controls the automatic functions like breathing, heart rate, digestion, detoxification, immune function. And it's designed to keep us alive. So you might think of it as having different speeds, right? If we're in danger, it kind of it's like the gas pedal, and suddenly it shifts focus to keeping you alive, which means blood flow is routed to the arms and the legs. Your vision kind of hyper focuses not to take in everything, but really just to help you make that next survival choice, so you can fight and flee the danger. Certain chemicals are released in the body. And then when you're safe, and when you're in danger, anything non-critical to your immediate survival, like your ability to digest, detoxify, support your immune function, anti-inflame, that all gets turned off. So when the danger passes, you kind of shift gears, you put on the brake. That's called your parasympathetic nervous system. And that's when blood is routed back towards the organs of digestion, detoxification. You can anti-inflame, you can heal. Think of, sympathetic, like you're having the party, there are a million people in your house, you're entertaining, you're busy, and then they all go home and you can clean up and
I
do
like that. I've
maintenance
never
and
heard that
restore.
analogy. Yeah.
That's
I
because I
like
just
that.
made it up. You talk about talking with kids, being a mom is really marketing, right? You're going to brush with the super minty toothpaste and put on your crazy cozy pajamas and sleep really well. You're trying to explain it in a way that people can hear. But basically, the state of your nervous system is critical to your ability to function. If it's like biking, right? If you're going up a hill and you're in high gear, you're going to have to work a lot harder. If you're trying to detoxify, anti-inflame, support your immune system, and you're stuck in the danger response, none of that can really turn on. It's foundational. And what's interesting is the kind of on-off switch between the sympathetic branch of the nervous system and the parasympathetic branch is the longest nerve in the body that most people have never heard of. It's your vagus nerve, cranial nerve number 10, quick anatomy lesson, starts at the very base of the skull, splits, winds around both sides, behind the earlobe. If you feel behind your earlobe right now, that's your mastoid bone that you're feeling.
Uh-huh.
That is where your vagus nerve is actually the most accessible to the surface. And then it kind of innervates the throat, the mouth, the larynx, the heart, the lungs, every organ of digestion and detoxification. And it's really interesting. It's a bi-directional communication system. This is how the brain communicates to the body and how the body communicates to the brain. And so anywhere that it touches and innervates, like the lungs, can kind of activate your sympathetic calm down branch. Like if you do yoga and you're always like, why do I always feel great in Shavasana? Why do I always feel better? It's because of the breathing and the postures. You're stimulating your vagus nerve, you're activating your parasympathetic nervous system, and you're basically turning on your ability to heal. And so that's where oils are super magical. There was a New York neuroscientist named Kevin Tracy, who in 2012 started playing with electrical implants, kind of pacemaker-like devices that were surgically implanted, where I was talking about right behind the earlobe on that mastoid bone to stimulate the vagus nerve. And that therapy has now been approved by the FDA for depression, epilepsy, and migraines.
Hmm.
And what's interesting is you do not need to have surgery to electrically implant a device. There are other ways to stimulate that spot. Acupuncture is one, and then stimulatory oils. Like I use clove and lime. I call it parasympathetic. I give the exact ratios in the book. But what's interesting is clove is a super stimulatory oil. Lime has super small molecules. And then I combine it with fractionated coconut oil as a carrier oil. People talk about diluting carrier oils. They do different things. Fractionated coconut oil is really small. And so it basically allows like kind of almost like an acupuncture needle, a really quick hit. An oil like jojoba is thicker and kind of slows integration. So it's more like a time release supplement. So you can use oils by combining them and putting certain carrier oils in place in incredibly strategic, specific ways to kind of shift the body into balance so that it functions better and it heals itself.
So I have several questions based on what you just said. So one, back to that, I believe the oil that you just mentioned, is that the one you called Parasim or oh,
Parasympathetic,
yeah.
yeah.
So I first got a sample of that at a healthcare entrepreneur conference where I, met you, and it smells amazing. I just the smell alone, I was like, oh, this is this is awesome. And I started using it, and I love that blend. What I have questions on though is, so in that blend, you said it contains stimulatory oils. So when you say stimulation, you're saying to stimulate the vagus nerve, not stimulate the person, but stimulate the vagus nerve to calm them down.
Yes,
I
think
just
of
want to
it
make
like
sure
a
the listener
bike.
hears that
Yeah.
right. We're not trying to
What?
stimulate you. We're trying to induce the calming parasympathetic nervous system, but the oils are stimulating to the vagus nerve. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's like
Okay.
a domino effect. Like the end result is you want to turn on your parasympathetic nervous system. To do that, you stimulate the vagus nerve. Like
Yes.
breathing stimulates the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve innervates the gallbladder. Coffee enemas stimulate the vagus nerve. And that actually, in kind of my trial and error process of figuring things out, I was originally thinking like, oh, you want to sedate the body to make it calm, and that I was surprised because I kept testing things, and I tested actually stimulating by accident. I originally formulated this blend for headaches and was testing a client with headaches and kind of tried it on the vagus point and realized, oh, wait a minute, it's you stimulate basically every pharmaceutical drug and every plant is either trying to stimulate or inhibit certain functions. Like GABA is an inhibitory function. Like if you have ADD and you have no inhibition, right? You want to stimulate more GABA. Whereas, other things you might want to sedate it so it calms you down. So you're always kind of playing with adjusting different levers to
Sure.
kind of have the desired result.
That makes sense. I just wanted to clarify that just for listeners if they're like me trying
Yeah.
to kind of learn this.
Yeah.
So tell us more about that blend and what that would be used for. Because when I think essential oils, I think, oh, lavender is calming, right? So lavender is something that I would want to use if I'm stressed.
Lavender is weird. It's like
Yeah.
Benadryl. It's calming or it's not. Like how I don't know, when my kids were little, we used to take them on red eyes and they'd say, "Oh, give them Benadryl and they'll sleep through the night." And that worked for my daughter. It made my son like that was the longest 6 hours I've ever spent on an airplane. So lavender is stimulating for some, and sometimes it has the opposite effect. Um, that one in particular,
Is that just
but
based on our genes then? Does that come back to genetics?
I think it has to do with kind of the nervous system sometimes can be switched and can do the opposite of
Oh,
what
okay.
you think it is. So you have to balance the nervous system. But to answer your question, so
Yeah.
the parasympathetic nervous system, it controls pretty much every healing function. The main thing is it controls your digestive cascade, right? Digestion really begins in the brain, like with smelling the food, and then that stimulates the mouth to release saliva, which helps to break down the proteins. If the proteins aren't broken down, then the immune system might react to them, and that can contribute to autoimmunity. Then, the food drops and stomach acid, Most people think like, oh, I have too much acid if I have acid reflux. It's the opposite. The stomach has to reach a certain temperature with the acid, level in order for the food to drop. It's a little bit like you don't get in the bathtub until it's warm enough, right? So the food hangs out here. And if the acid doesn't get high enough, that's when you feel kind of the acid reflux effect. So then the stomach acid breaks down the food. And then the pancreas releases enzymes, the gallbladder releases bile, the moving sidewalk that is your digestive cascade flowing through the small intestine, the large intestine, and being eliminated from the body. So at any juncture, if you're having acid reflux, if you're having motility issues, if you're having small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, irritable bowel syndrome, constipation, it's really a great way to kind of turn on your whole digestive tract. So it's a great one for that. Also detoxification issues, it really makes sure that the liver and the gallbladder are functioning, and again, motility to leave the body.
Sure.
What's super interesting is that it's the vagus nerve that triggers the release of the anti-inflammatory neurotransmitter acetylcholine. So if you're super inflamed, just, even if you don't have the oil, just stimulating it, or we're going to give away a free book that has like 25 ways to stimulate your vagus nerve. It's just a great practice. It's like brushing your teeth. It's kind of preventative,
Sure.
choices that help put your body in the right space to heal.
So it sounds like we all need that oil. Is that, or
Yeah.
that blend, I should say, is that blend also one that you would recommend for anxiety or insomnia, or is there a different blend that you have for that?
I like that blend a lot for anxiety, because one of the things that when you're, the sympathetic nervous system is kind of the danger. You don't feel safe. The parasympathetic nervous system is, I feel safe, I'm okay. An example I use, if you've ever been driving in traffic and someone totally cuts you off, and some days you're like, whatever, I'm not in a hurry, it's all good. And then the next day, the exact same situation can happen, and four-letter words are flying out of your mouth. And the only variable in that situation is you, and kind of how resilient and how safe you feel. Because when you feel safe and okay, the world can be blowing up around you and you're like, that's fine. I can still choose to keep myself safe. And other places you just go into a panic attack. And so parasympathetic is a great one. Truthfully, my best strategy for using essential oils for anxiety, it's kind of blend neutral. It doesn't matter what you have, whatever oil you have in your house, in your hand. If you don't have an oil, essential oils live in the fruit of citruses, so you can peel a tangerine and smell that. But when you're having, the brain is really interesting. There are different areas that do different things, and there are different hemispheres that get out of balance. So our colleague Titus Chu taught me this. When you're having a panic attack, that is the right frontal part of your lobe, so your right forehead, that's overactive. So in order to calm it, you need to do something to stimulate your left forehead. Since your nose, your olfactory nerve, goes directly to your left forehead, smelling anything through your left nostril. And you can literally just use your right thumb, plug your right nostril, smell directly from a bottle, smell anything that's fragrant. After like 3 breaths, your left nostril, or your left frontal lobe is kind of activated. It balances the two hemispheres and you feel less anxious. As a poster child of anxiety for myself, I can speak from both clinical and personal experience. It works really well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, because have a large population of listeners that are likely women in midlife, let's talk a little bit about how oils can support our hormone system. So, the adrenals you've already alluded to, right? That what about the thyroid and the ovaries? What oils do you use? I know that obviously using the parasympathetic blend is probably the most important in the foundation there, but what other oils should we be considering in that kind of demographic?
Yeah, we have one for the hypothalamus. So the endocrine system, the hypothalamus is kind of the CEO, and it's basically sending out chemical messages to the other endocrine organs to stimulate or sedate the release of different hormones, right? And then it's kind of getting all of the feedback. It's measuring all the cortisol levels in the blood and making sure that the levels are right. And so its ability to kind of send the right messages is based by that feedback loop. We call it like a negative feedback loop. Like I'll use cortisol, the stress hormone, as an example. The hypothalamus tells the pituitary to tell the adrenals release cortisol. We need energy in the system. And then it's monitoring the cortisol levels, and a little bit like the thermostat in your house. When it gets to your desired temperature, it doesn't need to be 200 degrees in your house, right? It shuts down at a certain time. And that only works if it's able to measure the temperature accurately. If it thinks it's like 50 degrees and it's actually 80 degrees, it's not going to work so well. So the hypothalamus gets a little overloaded with stimulus and input and can kind of go out of whack, and then it doesn't send the right messages to the other endocrine organs like the thyroid and the sex
Ovaries.
organs.
Yeah.
Ovaries. So basically, the more you can kind of reboot it, like your phone glitches, you turn it off, you turn it back on. We have an oil that you can put kind of right in the middle of your forehead, and it just helps to kind of reboot the hypothalamus to remain in balance. The other oils that I like for any kind of hormonal imbalances are supporting the liver and the gallbladder. A lot of times what happens is the liver kind of processes the toxins, the excess hormones, and then it's carried into the gallbladder, where the liver makes the bile, the gallbladder stores and concentrates the bile, and then the bile is supposed to carry the toxins out of the body, into the gut, out of the body. And what can happen is, stress, age, you name it, bad fats can make the gallbladder too viscous. So instead of flowing like water, it's more like molasses, and things don't leave, and the toxins get reabsorbed. And then the liver has to process them all over again. And that throws off the balance, because you now have old estrogen in your system, and you become estrogen dominant, and it's too much. So anything you can kind of do to support that exit route by supporting the gallbladder. I love taking binders, which help to grab the toxins and pull them out of the body. The more you can help the body take the garbage out, the more it helps your balance of the hormones that are in the body.
That was great information. So what is your oil blend that helps reset the hypothalamus? What oil is that, or what's that called?
It's a combination of oils. It's called hypothalamus. And this is actually a fun fact. So the way I formulate, it's very intuitive. Each you might think like colors. Each organ has its own kind of healthy frequency, and so plants and humans are very biofamiliar. So you can almost combine the essence of different plants, like you would combine colors to match the frequency of a healthy organ system. So the hypothalamus has its own healthy frequency. And so what I do is I create the blend, and then I go back and reverse engineer and research, like, why would that work? And it's fascinating. The blends, the oils in the hypothalamus blend, like pine, there's a lot of research that pine correlates with the hypothalamus.
Wow. And so you just say listeners can literally, that doesn't need to be put in a carrier oil. They can just put it, or would they put that on a carrier oil?
So what I did, so many of the people that found me really were super chronically ill, and they've tried so many things, and they feel like they've wasted so much time, money, and energy, and it didn't work. And the whole idea of trying to blend oils, they can barely remember to take more than 3 supplements a day. It was just too much, and they were worried that they were going to do it wrong, and they were really anxious. And I'm like, let me just do it for you. Let me find the right ratio. Let me dilute it to the right amount. Let me just make it easy. You buy it, it shows up, you just do it, right from the bottle. You don't need to do anything else, because the more obstacles you put in someone's way, the harder it is for them to actually adhere to it. So that was kind of my original idea. Like, let me just have a done for you solution. And then people would find me who, already had a lot of oils, and they just wanted to use the oils they had on hand. So that was kind of the point of the book.
Sure.
I'm going to give you the exact recipe. If you want to do it yourself, fabulous.
Go for it. Yeah.
If that's not your cup of tea, I'll do it for you. Just kind of trying to help meet people where they're at and give them more information about how they can use oils in an even more robust way to support their healing.
So what you're saying is yours does not need to be diluted. Your blends you can just apply right to your
I dilute to a certain point. Yeah. And then, like you asked about kids, I always over dilute for kids. It's kind of like my uncle's wife, when I was growing up, had like a weird thing with salt. And so my grandmother would cook with 0 salt in the food, and then you could just salt to your taste, and it's kind of like cutting your hair. Like, maybe, if you're thinking you want to maybe cut 4 inches, maybe start with like 2 and see how it goes, because you can always add more. So yeah, I always tell people dilute to start, or even The safest place to apply oils is the bottom of your feet. Some oils, you call them like thyme, oregano, even peppermint, eucalyptus. They're hot oils, which means that they might feel hot if you put them on your skin. They might make your skin look a little red. The bottom of your feet has really thick skin. It also has reflex points, but you really can't mess up if you put something on the bottom of the feet. Like, you will not hurt yourself.
So when I think of uses in kids, I think, okay, you need to calm them down so that they can sleep, right? Or
Yes,
maybe they're
yes.
sick and you want to support their immune system. Or maybe they need to concentrate. They have ADD, ADHD. Could you speak to some oils or blends that you have created that would be helpful in those situations?
Yeah, absolutely. The cool thing about kids is that they're really intuitive. And so with kids, I always let them pick. I always say, like, just pick the one that smells best to you. And people throughout time have asked me, like, well, I've heard that if it smells revolting, you should use it. And I'm like, no, would you eat something that smells revolting? Trust your intuition. If it smells good to you, it's a good fit. That's why, when we have our period, we crave chocolate because we need magnesium. When we're pregnant, we might crave a hamburger because we need iron.
Yeah.
Trust that what you crave, is what you need. And that can change. Like, frankincense is one. Sometimes it smells delicious. Sometimes it's not what I need, and just trust yourself. So if you're thinking of using oils with kids, let them pick. Like, maybe take them to, a healthy supermarket and just let them smell and let them pick the one that they want, because then they're more likely to use it. And you can, like, for the immune system, um, there's a different version. We call it immune support. People call it thieves. It's usually a combination of hot oils, like oregano and thyme always show up in research as being
Mm-hmm.
really strong for the
Mm-hmm.
immune system.
Yep.
And pick whichever one you like. For that one, I just like to put it on the bottom of the feet before bed. you know for kids, orange is a really good one. There's a lot of research behind peppermint and rosemary that can be kind of hot and too stimulatory for kids, but you can just smell it before studying. We used to do a thing, there's smell associated with recall. So, when we were like learning the times tables or the spelling words, we'd smell something while we were learning them, and then we'd practice smelling it before the test, and that always helped with
Mm-hmm.
recall, because you kind of, like, I do that sometimes. If I had a conversation, in freshly cut grass, like, I remember kind of the smell of the place where I had the conversation. It's just, the more senses you can engage, the easier it is.
Yeah.
For calming, citrus oil is really good.
Okay.
Rose is amazing. Lavender is hit or miss. It can be really calming or not. you
Okay.
know
Great tips. Could children also use the sympathetic blend
Yeah.
then? Okay.
Yeah. I say not, children under 18 months, like, I wouldn't add oils because they're so concentrated, but any child over 2, yeah. And we use it a lot. In fact, a lot of my clients, they call it the poop blend, because, if the kid's constipated, you just apply a little bit behind the earlobe, and digestion turns on.
Awesome. What about men? So I have heard before that men shouldn't use certain oils like lavender because they could have more estrogenic properties. Are there any oils that you would say are contraindicated in men?
It's so funny the way research goes. Like, that's referring to, like, a very small research study that was kind of done in a weird way. And what people don't realize is oils are adaptogenic, which means they'll meet
Good.
you where you're at.
Yeah, yeah.
So, if you test a group of, women that are kind of, they've gone through menopause and they might be low in estrogen, it might appear to raise their estrogen levels. If you did it on, like, preteen girls, it might lower them. It really is contingent upon the population you use it on. So the idea that they took 3 men in isolation, I've seen other research that kind of discounts that. I don't know that it necessarily is bad for men. The oils that I think I've noticed, a lot of my clients are women, but they shop a lot for their husbands.
Sure.
The adrenal blend, to kind of calm the adrenal response, parasympathetic to help turn on healing. We have blends. One of the other really great things about oils is that, what they do in plants is help move fluid, right? So if you think about driving on a freeway that theoretically has 4 lanes, but maybe 3 of them are blocked because it's under construction, traffic is going to move a lot slower. There's a lot narrower space to actually get through. And then when you kind of pass the construction part and all 4 lanes open up, you just cruise on through, right? So in our system, when veins are constricted or lymph is constricted, it's harder for fluid to move through. And so there's a backup. And oils, especially like cypress, black peppermint, black pepper, they kind of open the drainage pathways. So the good things, the oxygen, the nutrients can get in,
Yeah.
the bad things, the toxins can drain out. It just makes it easier. When there's not a traffic jam, you get to your destination faster.
Your wealth of knowledge, I want to just keep asking you questions here.
You're
So let
kind.
me go back to a moment to children, because um, I told you before we started the interview here today, I heavily use supplements in my practice. I use a lot of herbs, various nutrients. So I just don't know enough about oils to use them more strategically. I know kind of the general, recommendations many people know, but I want to even go back to using a diffuser. So you can obviously just put oils on your finger or breathe them literally out of the vial, the bottle that they're in. What's the difference between using a diffuser, or like my son had a cold and he had a humidifier going. Can I just put oils in his humidifier? Like, what's the difference between a diffuser or a humidifier? Is there any danger in not having that right ratio, or is it really not rocket science? Just put the oils in the humidifier and let it be.
It's not rocket science. The only problem that I see is that, if say it's that time of the month and you're cramping, you maybe take 2 Advil. You don't take like 2 Advil every 5 minutes.
Right.
Oils are medicine, and when you're diffusing 24/7, you're getting
A
too
little
much in the
much.
air.
Yeah.
And also like plastic diffusers, if you don't clean them regularly, they get moldy. It's
Yeah.
just it can be it's easier. It's called direct inhalation, is just smelling. For the situation you're talking about, like a
Yeah.
cold,
Yeah.
perfect situation. We have histamine oil that kind of helps to clean the air. I say if you're going to diffuse, do it for 20 minutes twice a day.
Not
Don't
constantly.
run it
Okay.
24/7. Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, what about, I know listeners are going to have some questions on any other absolute contraindications for oils or cautions. I mean, I
I
know the question comes up like which oils cannot be used internally, like which ones can you not ingest? Are there any general rules that you could share on that?
The only time I've seen people get hurt is diffusing and ingesting. And that doesn't mean it's bad. And it doesn't mean if you love adding lemon to your water, you should stop. It means like, I'll give you an example. There's a lot of great research that oregano can kind of address biofilms when ingested,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
oregano can also kill the gut flora in your system. So it's not a do it at home kind of thing. If you're working with a practitioner like yourself
yeah,
or
yeah,
someone else who's really good at this, there's a very specific strategic way to use oils internally. If you're just dumping a bunch of it into your own water, you can cause harm. So I'm kind
sure.
of, it's like when your kids were little, the general rule was, if there's something that could be dangerous, let's just say we're not going to do that. And there's so many other really easy ways that will never hurt you to integrate oils.
Sure.
And the other thing that concerns me is that I see so many of my clients have digestive challenges that it just doesn't feel like the most efficient way to use them. Like you're going to get a lot more bang from your buck, and go through the oil a lot less quickly. Just smelling or like flipping the bottle and putting a small drop as opposed to pouring half of it into a glass of water.
Sure, sure.
So
One
it's not going to kill you if you love it. You can keep doing it, but I just think there are easier ways to do it.
Sure. One of the questions I asked on Facebook, what questions I should ask you today, and someone did submit a question on how can essential oils help with chronic infections, things like viruses, which obviously we're exposed to, we always have been, but we still are exposed to, Lyme and even mold. So you mentioned that oregano can help with biofilms, but how else do oils, or are there specific oils that you use to support the immune system?
Yeah.
I know we've
Yeah.
driven home the concept of calming the nervous system so that the body can kick in, and then those natural healing properties are kicking in. But are there any others, or even for autoimmunity, that you want to speak to briefly?
Yeah. So the two best are parasympathetic and lymph. And then I would add in circadian rhythm if you're not sleeping. But basically, in addition to kind of activating the vagus nerve to turn on the sympathetic state, there's this idea that there can be infections in the vagus nerve.
Mm,
There's a Tufts researcher, Michael Van Eckler, who calls it vagus nerve infection hypothesis. Famed Lyme doctor Dietrich Klinghardt calls it vagus nerve toxicity. And what they found is that 95% of their clinically ill patients, including those with Lyme, have some kind of infection in the vagus nerve. And that kind of impedes signaling to the rest of the body, or it's kind of a minor under the radar infection that triggers the sickness response. And so kind of turns on these signals. So how do you, basically what Klinghardt says is that, we all have kind of microbes in the mouth, right? Be it the natural microbes that are there, be it a cavitation from a root canal or a wisdom tooth, be it like metal amalgams. How do the toxins drain from the mouth? Along the trigeminal nerve on the jaw. And then that directly intersects the vagus nerve in the neck. And there can be a small infection there. And that's another reason the clove and lime in this blend, you're topically applying it. Clove has been used throughout centuries to kind of remove toxicity in the mouth. It's really high in this constituent eugenol. That's huge for that. So that is a really big issue with Lyme. The other issue with Lyme is toxicity. And, if you think about, the neck is the biggest bottleneck in the body. You've got the structure, the bones, the muscle, the nerves, including the vagus nerve, the lymph, and then the vascular. And it kind of works like, think about if you're in the middle row, in the middle seat in the airplane, and you're next to two linebackers. Like, are you going to get your arm on the armrest? No way. If your toxins trying to drain from the brain and the vagus nerve is inflamed or the lymph is inflamed, there's all this congestion and kind of nothing can move. So Klinghardt and Dr. Schaffner, who do a lot of Lyme treatment, partnered with this amazing Italian researcher, Dr. Marco Ruggiero, and they were doing a lot of sonograms, like internal photographs of the neck with Lyme patients. And what they were finding is a lot of congestion, both in the lymphatics and the vagus nerve. So they're both congested and neither of them can really function properly. And they actually have their own Sophia Flow Cream, which is a combination of amino acids and oils, but basically topical application. You can even use castor oil of oils on the neck helps to kind of alleviate the congestion. Like, think of, there's a multi-car accident. What happens? The ambulance arrives on the scene, it cleans it out, and then everything can flow. So topically applying oils, our lymph blend, which is a lot of mint and vetiver and a combination that's really designed to kind of move fluid, and the lymph flows in one direction. So it really helps to get that moving. And then the clove and lime for parasympathetic helps to both kind of clean out vagus nerve toxicity, move the lymph flow, allow basically the garbage to leave the body so the toxins aren't setting off the immune system, and then you have all the inflammatory symptoms.
Fascinating. Yeah, thank you. Long podcast here today. Thank you for your time. I have a few more questions here. So before we get to your book, because I want to hear more about that, I have to ask about pets. So when we got our puppy, we have a mini golden doodle, super fluffy, lots of hair. She was so hyper, like so hyper. She's calmed down a little bit, but I thought, well, I can use essential oils on my dog, right? Well, I tried them behind her ear and she went nuts. I mean, she got more excited. So obviously maybe that was a case of maybe when lavender was not a good solution for her. So my plan backfired, but I know some people have used essential oils on their dogs, or maybe they're nervous to use them in their home because they're worried the impact they could have on the pet. Are essential oils safe for animals? How could they be applied?
Okay,
Do you know?
For dogs, I have a dog. They're totally fine for dogs. If you take a dog for a walk, you're taking them actually for a sniff, right? Dogs, their sense of smell is so much more intense than ours. So topically applying it, like, think of it so much more amplified. So with my dog, frankincense is the one he likes. And it's almost like kids. I just hold it out, and it's kind of like the food, right? If you put out lamb lung, they're going to go bananas. If you put out something that's healthy that they might not like, they might kind of like sniff it and walk away. So just let them smell, let them kind of approach, see if it helps them. Frankincense has been great for him when he's anxious. Also you can use it like for any kind of ticks or fleas or things like that, but just be careful with the topical application and make sure, like, even with clients, I always say, I want you to smell it first to make sure you like it, because I'm never going to apply something to them without checking, because if they don't like it, then they smell like it and it's just a hot mess. So that's for dogs. Cats are a different story. You have to be very careful with oils and cats, especially with diffusing. Vitamin or rat poison is actually vitamin D. Anything that we can't easily detoxify is a toxin, right? Like for us, it's metals. cats lack certain liver enzymes to properly like detoxify oils. So just be very careful with oils and
Hmm.
cats. Like if
Didn't
you're
know that.
going to
Yeah,
diffuse, make sure it's in a space that cats can leave. Don't necessarily do it in the room they hang out in. You
sure.
know, people get worried. They're like, I use oils around my cat. As long as you're smelling it, like that's not going to bug them. If you're going to topically apply it, maybe put it in a place they don't lick. You
Mhm.
know, you can totally work with it, but just be careful.
Thank you. Well, you are a wealth of knowledge, and I'm sure your book is jam-packed with even more information. So tell us about your book, and it's out now? I take
It
it?
is
Okay.
out March 16th.
Oh,
It's
March 16th. Okay.
pre-order
Okay.
now, and Amazon
Beautiful.
keeps
Yeah.
like kind of playing. Yeah, thank you. And it really kind of getting back to your earlier point, I think oils, people use them for everything, but I think they really are the most effective for 5 specific things that I see as the underlying root cause of most issues, which is balancing the nervous system, making sure that you're in that parasympathetic state of the nervous system and helping to detoxify the vagus nerve if that's an issue, supporting restful sleep, helping to move both lymph flow and circulation. So the good things get in and the bad things get out,
Hmm.
helping to really calm your endocrine system and increase energy. So you have the energy to heal. And then really modulating your immune system, making sure that it doesn't overreact or underreact. It's a little Goldilocks, right? You don't want it too hot or too cold, but just right. And so I really detail part 1 is kind of explaining those imbalances and how oils work. And then part 2 is giving you the specific oil recipes and how to use them.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And all of your products are found on your website, right? Vibrantblueoils.com.
Vibrant Blue oils. And if they're interested in, oils, I think are great. I compiled a list of 25 ways that you can activate your vagus nerve, stimulate your vagus nerve to activate your parasympathetic nervous system. And you
Yeah.
can grab that free bonus chapter at boostthebrainbook.com/gift. It's free. You just grab it and, just pick one. They're 25. If you pick one and you do it once a day, that's great.
We'll definitely post all of those links in the show notes. I'm excited to read your book.
Thank
So
you.
I have to ask, so if you were only allowed one oil or one of your oil blends the rest of your life, what oil could you not live without?
Oh my God, parasympathetic, especially like
Do you
with
use it
all
every
the
day? I mean, is it like
honestly, on election night, I was considering, I don't drink, and I'm like, this might be a time to take up day drinking. I was using it probably every 5 minutes. When I'm that
wow.
anxious, it really helps. Yeah.
Wow, wonderful. Well, I wrap up all my podcasts with your top longevity tip. So what would that top longevity tip be for our listeners?
Moving, movement, anything because that's part of the reason like lymph oil is so good. If you're not moving, you're not moving your lymph. I really think just walking, the side to side eye movement, breathing fresh air, just move.
Love it, love it, love it. Well, thank you so much again for all your time today, for coming on the show. Again, I look forward to reading your book, and I've got to try that lymph blend. That was new to me, so I look forward to trying that. So thank you so much, Jodi.
Thank you.